Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, because the world is round, so different time zones, not flat. And welcome to the latest edition of FreeThought Hour with my co-host, Tercia. How the devil are you, Tercia? The latest edition of FreeThought Hour. Hang on, my co-host, Tercia. How the devil are you, Tercia? The latest edition of FreeThought Hour. Oh, dear. Let me stop this. My co-host, Tercia. How the devil are you, Tercia? I've got feedback happening. Dear. Sorry, I stopped it. Okay, sorry about that. I forgot I had YouTube open. I was watching the news. And so we were live and recording ourselves. Oh, it's all, feedback. Whole round used to be gone.
Great.
Anyway.
I had a wonderful romantic date night with my dear husband. None of it was out of our free will. It's all been determined. Yes, I'm well. I'm well. We walked to the restaurant. It's been a lovely evening, windy and quite cold, but we haven't had winter yet, which is worrisome. So have you had summer yet, John?
Yeah, we've got late arrival of summer here, and it is slightly too hot, because we didn't think to equip our homes with air conditioning because it's never needed them until now, of course. Yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, it's enough of the weather nonsense. Let's introduce Jason, our guest, shall we?
Let's do.
Stop picking your nose, Jason.
It's one of those post-shave kind of, you got the little feelers still going.
Anyway, welcome, Jason. How the devil are you?
I'm doing all right. Doing pretty good today.
Good. Excellent. Well, I woke up this morning, which is always a good start. Yeah. So we usually start these events by interviewing our guest. And we're curious, nosy people, so we want to get some background on you. So are you willing to give us a little life story?
Well, John, can I just,
sure.
Before Jason starts, I think Jason is unique in the sense that he volunteered to come on our show. Am I right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Pretty much.
That's fantastic.
Well, we
no
do
blame but myself, right?
We do normally have to go fishing and strong arm people into joining us, but then having been on here, they rush to come back. In fact, I've got people now rushing to join the panel of our other show that goes out later on this week.
It was actually your last show when you had your last guest from last week. His topic kind of inspired me to pipe up and talk about the topic.
That's right.
And I think what was his name again?
That was don't ask me questions like that.
Oh, sorry.
Missile. Paul Mizzle. Meisel.
Yeah, he was talking about the experience, that everything has an experience, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of inspired me to okay, well, this is a free will topic, so let's dive in.
Good.
But if you want a backstory, I can indulge you.
Yeah. You start with, I was born at a very early age.
I was born on Long Island and moved to Southern California when I was very young. High school, college, I have a bachelor's in electronics engineering. I spent a good 10 years in the real estate industry on the tech side, not in the sales side, but on the tech side. And I spent the last 20 years as a website designer. I am a web agent. And that's pretty much it. I have one son. He's away at college. And I spend my free time playing video games and riding my e-bike.
Very fit. Yeah. So the thing is that we also like to find out a bit about your religious background. Do you have one?
I wasn't raised in a religious household. It was Jewish, but more traditional, secular kind of Jew worldview. I actually was in the atheist movement in the early 2000s, the YouTube atheists and the conventions and all that powwow. So I don't have a religious view, and in fact, I am quite advocately against it. I think I think it is a mind virus in a sense, if you can describe it like that. It is a meme. It just a big meme.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I can believe that. Sure. So I think your favorite subject at the moment is free will, isn't it? This is
It's something that I had been working on for, noodling in my mind for a while, and everybody's got grand unified theories of everything type of thing. It was only until, again, I was inspired by the end of your last show, to talk about it. And I never really formalized it either. And this is actually maybe a good point, or a good time to put in the disclaimer that when we get to the slides, the presentation, I just made that presentation like the last 2 days. Like it's maybe a day's worth of work. I kind of just threw it together. So,
especially for us.
But yeah, but specifically to actually formalize maybe my own idea of what I thought of free will, right? I wanted to actually just, okay, I've had these ideas kicking around, but let me put it down and try and look at it. And so again, it might be a little scattered, like maybe one thought doesn't connect to the next between the slides that I thought it did. And again, that's why we do this though, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I don't think any of us would claim to have the absolute definitive answer to any of these questions, but we like to engage other people's brains and discuss possibilities. Yeah.
I would like to ask you, Jason, before we begin, I'm interested in that you actually went through the trouble, which most people don't do, including myself, of spending 2 days to set out your ideas in a structured manner. So I find that quite challenging to do, because what happens to me is when you start to do it in 2 days, it's quite an achievement, because how difficult was it for you to do this? Did you find it challenging?
He's no slouch on the keyboard.
Yeah, well, I'm pretty fast on the computer because it's my living. But I also really enjoy making slide presentations.
Okay, but in terms, I'm actually more thinking in terms of getting your thoughts organized. Did you find it challenging, or was it sort of like it went into a flow once you started?
I can let me see if I can explain the process. I open a Google Drive Word document, and under Tools, you can pick voice typing, right? So now I've got free dictation, and so I'll just open up a Word document, start talking my ideas. They'll be scattered. And then I'll have maybe 2 pages of just notes, random notes. I copy all that and I paste it into ChatGPT, and I said, organize this for me. Give me the main points. And then I work through it. You can't just like and then you get the result. It's like any other project. It's going to have revisions, and you got to fine tune it, especially with ChatGPT. You got to, okay, no, that's not what I meant.
Yes.
And
Wow.
and then and I even used it for the slides, like the titles of the slides. I did it all, and the artwork I used ChatGPT. And so the caveat to I did it in 2 days is I had an AI agent help me.
Yeah.
We're going to wonder how we managed without ChatGPT one day, aren't we?
Someday, yeah.
Well, that's why it took me as a student a week or so to write a literature assignment. But when I thought up of, I mean, I did not prepare for tonight's discussion, although I am quite well versed on the topic of free will, because I am a proponent of the work of Robert Sapolsky. So I am convinced we don't have free will. Therefore, as far as the topic is concerned, I know a little bit. But I'm so glad I asked this question, because the fact that you went through the process helps me so much. And I'm going to copy that when I do assignments and notes for my students. I haven't made use of that, because Thank you so much for that, Jason. So the evening has already been worth my time. I hope it's worth that of our listeners, and I hope we get more than Dean, who's joined us. So I'm really looking forward to see what has been cooked up between Jason and ChatGPT.
There we go. Shall I launch the slides, Jason?
Let's go. And on that last note there, Tercia, I did a little bit of promotion. I'm hoping we get a few people show up. John, if you want to, I don't know if you can see the live numbers.
We've got one.
All right. Hey, that's all we need, right?
Thanks, Dean. You're a stout fellow, being a loyal regular.
Excellent. Let's crack into the slides. Let's go.
Okay, so Dean's got a comment here that we'll come back to, I think, later on, because it's a very good question and a comment. Right, the slides. Here we go. Slide one is the title. Now I'll follow your instructions.
I'll just say next or back.
Yeah. Okay.
So here we are. Let's go. Title slide. Next. Table of contents. I do want to say this slide presentation is available. John, you can put this in the YouTube comments after the show.
Sure.
But if you go to jasonhoblin.com, my website, /freewill, it should redirect you right to this entire presentation.
Great. Thank you.
It's just jasonhoblin.com /freewill.
I will make a banner of that.
Okay. We're just going to go through some things here. If you want to go to the next, after you make the banner, the next slide.
Yeah. That's the next slide.
I want to start with defining our terms, what we're not talking about, and then where I'm kind of going with this. This is not a philosophical rabbit hole. We're not talking about a soul. And these next two are important because I think this is where a lot of the conflation on the topic comes in.
Yep.
It's the idea that free will has anything to do with meaning or purpose or why we're here. Or it's the idea that free will has anything to do with morality, our subjective human morality. I've seen both Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett, like even in the last video I watched, like within the second sentence, he's talking about morality. And I'm like, how do you get there? That's not part of whether or not choice exists. So what I do want to talk about is determinism and predeterminism, right? The predeterminism meaning the future is determined, rather as determinism is we're in this moment because everything that came before it made this moment happen, right?
I see. That's interesting. I'm going to make a note of that. I want to revisit that. But can I just ask you a question about this slide?
Yeah.
Do you mean you've got define the terms is not go down philosophy rabbit hole, not solipsism? Do you mean solipsism or sophistry? I'm not sure what.
Yes, basically meaning that everyone else is an illusion and you're really your own universe and you are the god of that universe, and it's an absolute, which we'll talk about later. And so I think
that's solipsism, and I think you've got a spelling error there.
Did I spell it there wrong? Probably. I can fix it. What is it supposed to be?
Solipsism.
SOLY, is it?
I think. Let me check.
Yeah.
You check.
I'll still have to open my tablet.
It's okay. I found it.
Good.
Got it.
If you hit F5, John, it should refresh.
Ooh.
This is
no, that's not, that doesn't work in StreamYard.
Okay. Let's not worry about it. But yeah, I meant the solipsism, the idea that you're your own. And same thing with a pure objectivism. Again, you're going to an extreme that I don't think is the right way to go. I do want to try and come up with free will as a more clear definition, as a function of choice. I want to talk about randomness and uncertainty in the universe, numbers as layers, and things get bigger as the numbers go up, and scales are order of magnitude type of thing. And then we'll talk about logical operators, just the one mostly. And let's go next slide. So if you can play this, John, if you click on that, does that play?
I don't think so. It's no, it's
Oh, it
just
goes to the next slide. What if you go to the slide and hit the space bar?
no, it just goes to.
I'll just explain it then. This is one of those, you start the marble at the top and it goes through a Rube Goldberg kind of chain reaction set of events. And I want to make sure that we're clear on the definition of determinism, like that we're understanding that this is how, in your case, Tricia, you think the universe is functioning, that everything is a causal chain of reactions.
Yep.
Right. Okay. We also call that the incredible machine.
It would be a marble run, I think.
We can read this later if you want, but and this was written by ChatGPT from my notes. So, and I read it, and it's maybe we'll just read the highlighted one there at the bottom. Yeah, I don't want to read this. Let's just go to the next slide. This is the point of those two paragraphs. My premise, which is free will, is a demonstrable and variable emergent property of life. Right, that we can show it exists, we can measure it. It does vary. It's not a single value type of thing. And that quote is also from the two previous paragraphs. While much of our behavior is influenced by predetermined factors, there remains a meaningful, albeit limited, capacity for personal agency. So this is my argument.
Okay.
Next. I'm going to start with some of the rebuttals. I know usually you'll do the arguments for, like I kind of turned it around and I'm doing a few of the rebuttals first before I start really arguing my point. First of all, absolute answers are usually, I actually revised this. I said that to be funny. Absolute answers are never correct. Right?
Well, I would agree with that, except that I would say they're not available in reality.
It works in practicality. Like I can just give a yes or no answer to a question, right? Like it works at the local level, but when we're dealing with science and we're dealing with the specifics of things, I think that to say that an answer to a question like does free will exist, to say a hard no, just right there, like just in itself, inherently is a flawed response. I think just by using an absolute answer in that can't be right. And then the next one, and this one's mine, I kind of came up with, is I don't see how determinism can scale. I see how it works locally, right? If I'm in my environment, my local universe, and I or not universe, but my on Earth type of thing, and I set up a series of events and those causalities happen. But when you go to other orders, when you go to like really, really small or really, really big, I feel like determinism will break down. And it does. We know that when you go to the really small quantum level, we've got indeterminacy, right? Or when you go to the really big level, we've got, I guess you can't really use the background radiation as an example of chaos, but it's still, it doesn't seem like, and I tried looking at it as maybe my human brain can't just conceive of how complicated it could be, right? Like the orders of time or how big space is. Like maybe I just can't conceive of it, how it could be deterministic all the way down, right? Or all the way back to the past. And I don't think it's that I can't see it. I feel like when systems get big enough and complex enough, disorder arises. It emerges. Right? There's faults and cracks and there's wobble, there's variation, like something happens when the complexity increases. And that emergent property is why I think you can't have a fully deterministic universe.
Interesting.
Okay. Do you want us to listen to the presentation and then ask questions?
Are you taking notes?
I'm taking notes.
I kind of want to just go through it.
Yeah, great, cool.
I feel like if we start talking, we won't stop.
I'll make my notes as detailed as possible.
Next, John. Next slide. And then here's where I've heard, again, I haven't, Tertia, you said you did a bunch, you know a little bit about this topic. I honestly have not done what I would call a due diligence in researching this. I didn't watch a ton of videos. I didn't read a bunch of, I've never read Sam Harris's Free Will book, right? I haven't done a lot of research. This is mostly just kind of my armchair philosopher throwing shit at the wall to see what happens type of thing. So from what I did see about these topics, were with Sam Harris and Daniel Dennett talking about it. I do regret that Daniel Dennett might not be able to see this video.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
The error of morality. I think, again, Sam Harris, if you read this is what ChatGPT said, and from some of the stuff I read, he goes right into the idea that free will is a part of the brain and it has to do with morality, and that free will doesn't exist because bad brains exist, was kind of my takeaway from that. And yes, bad brains exist, but that doesn't negate the idea that there was any choice there, good brain or bad brain. So that's that one. And then this next one, again, is more I really think it's a good argument. I don't know, though, because I have zero training in neuroscience. But the idea here, again, I heard Sam Harris say that we don't have free will because we stuck a head in a machine and we can see your brain's making the choice before you're aware of it. So therefore, no free will. And my mind is like, well, wait a minute. First of all,
it's my
still
brain.
my brain, right?
Yeah.
It's still, and if you factor in time, like I'm going to learn something, item A from one point in time, later on I learn item B, and then now I have to make choice C. They're back there, right? They're back in my brain and stored as reference, and then I'm making a real-time choice now. And whether or not I make that, I'm aware that my brain has decided to make that choice. I call it a brain lag or a lag state.
Yeah.
Just because it might take, 500 milliseconds before I'm aware of that choice doesn't mean I didn't make it.
No, it's just the time it takes to get from the subconscious to the conscious.
Exactly. So that's my error of time argument against those two. Yeah. Tercia looks like she wants to say that now.
No, I will keep my mouth shut.
All right, let's keep going so we can talk.
Not
Go
because
next.
I have any choice in the matter, but
see. Next slide, John. So this is, again, armchair physics here. I have no, like, as far my physics training is as far as you get it with electronics, right? Like there's no, and everything else has been watching our PBS science videos. So there's no, if I say things that are wrong, it's because I don't know what I'm talking about. But here are my, I have two, there's a physical and logical proofs that for me, point to that uncertainty, that randomness, that emergent property that would turn into free will at the human level. One is the right-hand rule. If you know of magnetics, like it shows that there is some sort of angular momentum in the universe, that there's some kind of angle. Yeah, it shows a direction. So that's, it shows that there's a fault there type of thing. The other one is the double slit experiment. It proves the observer. I don't think this necessarily proves free will, because you're kind of just chasing your shadow in that one where, if I look at it, it doesn't collapse. Or if I look at it, the wave collapses. If I don't look at it, the wave doesn't, right? That's really just kind of a chasing your shadow. But I feel like it's related to it. I don't know how it applies, but the next proof would be in the maths, which we're going to get to those truth tables. So I'll show that there. And then just kind of in the definition of life versus non-life. Like we have a static universe that, left to its own devices, things at rest will just go on. But then when you cross into the life realm, and again, there's a whole blurry section in there, layer there too. But once you cross into this is definitely a living conscious being or thing. That's where the idea of free will, even of choice, even emerges, right? You're not going to see a rock make a choice. You're not going to see a planet make a choice, but you might see a human or even a dog make a choice.
Yeah.
So I think that boundary is kind of like, well, look, we can really say that free will is a component of the life structure. And then within our own little biosphere, there's an anthropological proof. The philosophy of free will is an entire discipline, right? And I'm one of those where there's smoke, there's fire, right? Now, again, that I clarify that with anthropological, right? But and then the next one is we know that attention. If you look at the scale of life, the things the evolution of life, right? The complexity, the scale of the complexity of life. It has a correlation to attention and choice, also scale with that complexity, right?
Yeah.
The more complex, the higher order the being, then the more choices they have over their own universe.
Yeah. And can I intersperse a little thought here? Because a lot of people think that because there's been overall progress from simple to complex, thanks to evolution, it is not an intentional direction, because some organisms have lost sophisticated features. And I mean, if you take a tapeworm, for example, it has gone backwards from its native form, which had free will. Tapeworms don't have a lot of free will.
Not a lot, and there's a qualifier there. It's not none. It's just, and it might be 10 to the minus 20 or whatever, like really, really small, but it's not zero, which we'll get to here. And the other one too is inside of our own kind of anthropological systems, we have contrarians and failure to comply. This idea that even though we know what the physical world and our social world, yet I'm still gonna jump off a building?
Yeah.
Right? There's free will there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, sure.
And then a physical force of others, the idea of, which is another thing that kind of arises out of the complexity of life, the awareness, the first self-awareness and the awareness of others, right? Or maybe it's the other way around. And the force, I put that in quotes, the force of other people imposing their free will on yours is, again, something you can kind of measure, I think, at some level. Next slide. This is just a basic truth table. Everyone should know how this works. I'm using the AND operator. AND is a multiplier. It's basically a high form of addition, right? It's addition. We're just doing this plus this, but it's multiplied. So 0 and 0 gets you 0. If we 1 times 0 is 0. Oops, I didn't put the 1 in those. The two falses there are 1, 0. And then 1 times 1 is 1. And so we have a basic simple logic truth table here. We understand that bottom right corner there is reality, right? Is what we can point to as true. It's demonstrable, it's real, it's logically exists, right? Now let's go to the next slide.
You got a couple of corrections to make on that grid.
I don't doubt it. So here's what I did. Between the orders, between the 0 and the 1, we just kind of open that up and we put in a third column in the middle. And I put 0.5 there, but it's important to understand that that's a placeholder. I don't literally mean half. I mean, it could be like, 10 to the minus 20th, right? It could be really small number, could be much bigger, but I think that particular number is going to be really small.
You're making the point that this is not polar, there is a range.
Correct. Correct. And actually, this is the wrong. John, is there any way you can reload this? Because I wouldn't have a mouse to point, I went and recolored this.
Oh. Well,
it should be saved.
This is the one that you sent me. So
I think it's just not refreshed. I think you had it in memory, and I just did the update like an hour ago.
Right. It would seriously hamper the program to.
Okay, I'll just try and talk it through then.
Yep.
We know, like, on the 0 axis, all of that's just going to be 0 because you're multiplying by 0, right? And then in the bottom right corner, we have the 1 times 1 is 1. So we know that that's true. What this new truth table creates are those 3 right there, the 2.5s, because you're multiplying 1 times 0.5. It creates 1 on each axis, right? And then it creates that kind of dross eddy random one, which is 0.5 times 0.5, which is 0.25 or a quarter. So let me explain what I think these are. We know what true is. That's our objective real reality. The choice columns, where you see those 2 choice ones, the 0.5s, a choice is based on relativity. It's based on something real, right? So that's why one of the numbers is 1. It's an operator. Like, it's already starting with, okay, we're in reality, right? And now relative to that, we have to make a choice, because inside of a choice, it's not just A or A, right? It's relative to A. I'm going to have B. B is relative to A is relative to B. The choice is in the relativity of them, right? And so that's the 50-50 choice. So in this case, it would be 50-50. It could be whatever. Again, it could be 0.1 or whatever. When you're making a choice, it's based on something real, and then you have in this case, a 50-50 chance. And so that's why there's 2 of them, because it's eventually going to add up to the future, or what decision is made. But those two squares right there, which I actually colored blue, green, the true one is green, the choice ones are blue. They show that's where mathematically you can find the free will that I'm talking about, right? You're going to find that as a number of how much, as a quantitative value. And then if I can explain the dross eddy random, there's a side to the universe that we just don't know, right? Whether it's dark energy, whether it's beyond the quantum substrate, there's a side of the universe that we just don't know, and randomness and uncertainty comes from there, right? Like, if we got those, and that value, and if you look, because it's randomness times itself, right? So it's back in the beginning of this episode, John, when you were having your feedback loop problem, that's coming from that square right there. Right? That's an error in our broadcast. It's a random error, and it emerged because of you were broadcasting yourself, and it really is the random times random. We don't see this. We don't see this value in our real universe, right? It's an emergent. This is kind of something that we see the effects of it, type of thing. But anyway, that's where this chart is. I don't know how it really can apply in the real scientific realm, as far as, experiments to set up and test free will and randomness, but I feel like there's some numbers here that might help. Can you go to the?
It'll need some cogitation, I fear.
Well, it needs a formula. I mean, it needs a formula. Can you next slide? So this is one street guy talking to another one. Is like, where's your girlfriend? And he goes, well, it depends. If she leaves her house at 3 p.m., she's traveling down the street at 35 miles an hour, and she lives 9.5 miles. You tell me when she get here, right? Like, doing hard algebra in the middle of the street corner. And the other guy says, well, it depends if he stops to see her hoe. See, or to see his girlfriend or something. I don't know. And then the first guy then responds and says, that's what we call a variable. Was the punchline of that one, is that's what we call a variable. Anyway, next slide. I want to answer this question. If a tree falls in the woods, no one's around to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, the answer is yes, because the question was if a tree falls in the woods, right? And by definition, falling trees make sound. Right. So, and it doesn't have to, the question becomes of where do you draw the line of what's the observer? Does it have to be a human standing there when you say no one? The rocks are going to hear the sound, not hear it, but they're going to feel the sound vibrations, right?
They'll be crushed by it.
The birds, which are semi-sentient, the birds are gonna hear the sound of a falling tree. Now, so it begs the question, okay, well, what if I had a tree out in the void with nothing around, right? But, well, then you run into the problem of it's not relative to anything. So it's
Yes.
falling relative to what?
Yes. There's no yardsticks to judge it against. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
So the answer is
I
yes,
have
but
I
it's
have
a
a
bad
quibble
question.
here. I have a quibble here because I like to distinguish between sound and noise. Because I like to use the word noise for something that's being created, a vibration in a medium due to some activity. And I like to use the word sound for something that's being detected by a hearing equipment, a microphone or something. And so therefore one is a perception and the other is a creation. It's like the difference between transmission and reception.
It almost sounds like what I mean, like between non-life and life, right? Like sound, you're saying one is just kind of the mechanical.
Yeah.
Um, that actually happens with me with sound. If I hear background noises and it's kind of natural,
Mm,
it doesn't bother me. But if I know there's an intelligence behind it,
mm,
even if it's rhythmic, like a jackhammer or a dump truck,
mm,
uh, it bothers me. I don't know.
mm.
Anyway, next slide. This is just a bunch of stupid notes. I was trying to get waxing a little poetic here between what is the observer and then what are all the veils that we have to see through in order to understand the universe we're looking at. A couple important points. Yeah, this is just a note slide. Let's go next one. So this one, the first time I heard this phrase was at I don't think it was a TED, it might have been a TED talk. It was Kevin Kelly. He was talking about the next 5,000 days of the web. And he described attention as a currency.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're all on the internet and we know all these social media networks are vying for our attention, clearly they've got algorithms for that, right? So attention it's definitely something that is calculable. It's a variable. It can be quantified, I think is what I'm trying to say
Absolutely.
here.
Well, you asked me earlier how big our audience was, and I said it was 1. It's now 3. We've
All
got
right. We tripled our viewing audience.
our attention. Yes.
And so I guess to my point, because I want to get through these slides because I really want to talk to Tercia. Free will, I think, is a property of that. Like of that function of our brain of attention, and our ability to focus on things. The choices are within that domain. Is what this slide is about. Next slide. This is my actual hypothesis. The 16 was the slide number. Ignore that. This is my free will function hypothesis. So back to the idea that the answer can't be just no or zero, right? We don't want free will is just no. I would say that it's also not 100%, right? I'm not a demigod and can crack open the sky and sprout wings and fly away, right? I can't free will to control my universe. So therefore, most of it, right, if you're starting from the Big Bang and you go through all the steps and you build it all the way up to here now, you go through all these layers, the chemistry, the biology, right up to now. I think 95% of that may be determined.
Yeah,
Right?
sure.
Maybe a result of, okay, well, all the decisions that were made back then, plus its own 95% determinacy equals now. And then each now has a 3 or 2%. And again, these could vary. I'm just pulling, I think I even said it there at the bottom. I know I've done differentials in calculus, right? I know how to just fucking guess. and let's see what works.
Yeah. Well, so what we seem to be talking about here is the fact that most of our experiences do not come with options. There's no choices. And it's only the
98% of it. 98% of it would be no choice. Correct.
And it's only the few things that are actually on the menu that we can make a decision a willful decision about.
Correct. Correct. So 95% of it would be the physics side of it, the biology, the science side of it, the hard science, and then 3% of it would be the social, the soft science type of stuff, the governments you're in, the local laws and morality of whatever culture you're in, and that kind of forms where you are. But then you still choose whether you get out of bed in the morning or whether you're going to have a bagel or a donut for breakfast, or which in this case, I actually got lost in which theme to pick for the slideshow, right? Like I'm looking at the choice of which template to use for a slideshow about free will. And
donut template or the bagel template.
Right. And so, well, that was breakfast. So again, this 2% might be high, right? And maybe it's 4 and 1. Maybe it's and these orders might be off. Maybe it's 0.0, 3 sigma down, right? And that's what we would do in an experiment. But just to kind of lay it out here, this is my hypothesis. Next slide. We can't watch this. This is basically the architect from the Matrix talking to Neo about how he was all predestined and programmed to arrive here right now. Right? It was all pre-programmed.
Yeah.
And then he's sitting there watching Neo think and trying to figure out where that choice is, where the problem of choice is in his mind. The movie, Hollywood likes to write it off as, oh, it was love. It's because of a girl, which is all nice. But to my point, where most of all of Neo's life was predetermined, but then even standing in front of the architect's looking at him to try and find where the choice, like the computer is trying to find where the choice is. Anyway, next slide. This is just a summary. Yes or no answers are probably not correct. Determinism doesn't scale. We can probably maybe leave this screen up and just open it up to Q&A and talking. I'm kind of done. There's some addendums, but they're kind of side topics.
Okay.
Let's leave this one up and I'd love to hear thoughts.
Okay, Tessia, do you want to go ahead?
Do you think you'll be able to stop me once I begin?
Ooh, I don't know.
Okay.
I can mute you. I can do that.
You wouldn't, John. I know you wouldn't mute me. You would just tell me to shut up. You just took away the last 2% of free will that I had.
but you experienced it, right? You saw him act his free will over yours. Like there's something there.
Well, yeah. So John knows. I think John's being very devious because he knows that my pet question. I don't know how many of our shows you've been watching, but I started about a couple of weeks ago to.
I see probably every other.
Okay, well, I've asked almost. If John gives me time, I will ask all our guests: do you believe in free will? Because just yes or no. Because free will is at the moment, it has been for the past 5-6 months, the topic that I have dug into the most. So there's so much to say. I will try to be as focused as possible. So the first thing that I want to ask you is, and this is, you said that sound bothers you if it's man-made. So I'm not going point for point. This is the first.
If I can detect an intelligence behind it, and that goes for birds, right? Like if I hear
that's it. Yes. So what I want to ask you is, if you had free will, and what bothers me about what bothers me about
deep breath.
Yes. What bothers me about the hypothesis that you stated is, why do you have to cling on to that maybe 2% of free will that we have, granted that 98% of what happens we have no choice in? Why are you unwilling, or are you unwilling to go the full Monty, the whole 9 yards. And I have become convinced that we have no option but to go the whole 9 yards and the full Monty, because to put a number on, we have 98% or so free. That would mean that you'd have to, where does my free will end and where does it begin? And the way that I would, the way that I would like to begin the answer to this question is, would it be possible for you to choose to have the same reaction to natural sounds that you have to human sounds, or to human sounds that you have to natural sounds? Could you choose to ignore or filter out natural sounds?
Well, some of that would be neurological, right? Maybe I just it's an anxiety thing, and I just neurologically, biochemically can't tune it out. But also in that same idea, to answer your question, is something Matt Dillahunty often points out, is that we don't choose what we can believe.
He's
right?
wrong.
We believe. Well, no, he's right about that.
I agree.
It's the things around us that influence us, and then we make choices based on that. Hold on, I'm going to talk this through. I see where it's going. We make choices based on that, right? But there's also a difference between what I know as belief and facts. And so if I'm choosing between A and B and I'm weighing out the options, and then even if I see that A is a better choice, but I choose B anyway, maybe even specifically to prove free will exists. We're kind of conflating ideas here. I think I brought in the idea of belief, and I wasn't ready for that.
Okay,
Can you,
what you said,
back to your question about I lost it. Sorry.
Responding to the sounds.
Responding to sounds. Can I choose? Of course I can. I can choose to put headphones on.
Yeah. And why what's his name is wrong? I've forgotten his name now. Dillahunty. How could you forget a name like Dillahunty, eh? Anyway, here's why he's wrong. I'd like him to tell, I mean, I know it's not possible because the boxer is dead now, but I'd like him to tell Muhammad Ali that he didn't choose to leave Christianity and become Muslim.
Well, I think he would say that Muhammad Ali was given a bunch of information about Islam and decided to make that choice.
Yeah. There you go.
He
so
was,
I think
no, he was
by then, but by then he would have had a. By then he would have had
the belief part of it is, well, then I'm just going to call it my belief, my religion. That's what I believe. That's what I think. It's kind of what you're saying. So maybe I do need to retract that, John. Maybe you're right on that. Maybe I think maybe Matt means it in the context of religion, like within that domain. Like you don't really choose. I don't know. We have to dig further on that one.
The thing that I think might be helpful is to ask you whether you are. Could you grant that we experience what we call choice, but that in itself is an illusion, as much as the idea of a self is an I'm not sure I'd call it an illusion, but that is an emergent property with most of us. So there I'm with Sam Harris in that the moment we start thinking about choice and free, do I have free will? That presupposes that there is an I that can enforce that free will. And I'm not sure that there's a reality. There's definitely a reality. But even the I, what I experience as me, myself, that could change when I take a certain drug that alters my brain state. Which means,
Tessia, didn't you, about 10 years ago, choose to leave Christianity to become an atheist?
No, I don't think I chose it.
You think that as far back as the Big Bang, right? So we're talking like ridiculous kinds of time and space scales, that it was preordained that the biochemistry relative to your current environment would collapse and make you make that choice?
No, I don't think it was preordained, although that was what my
I don't mean
carbon.
preordained like if someone programmed it. I mean it was just predetermined
No, I
because of
don't think it was
causality.
it wasn't predetermined. I think there's a distinction between predetermination and something is determined. And I don't believe that I made a choice. And I'll tell you why. Because the fact that I was born to the parents that I was born to. So I was born the first child of a young couple who were both white in South Africa in 1973. They were both the first of their family to get a past high school education. My mother experienced quite a bit of stress when she was pregnant with me because they were young and my father was still a student and she was working because my father. So everything that happened to me since my mom fell pregnant with me determined what I would come out like.
Hang on.
Yeah. And all of that enabled me to come to the realization that I'm no longer convinced of the faith that I was.
Okay. Right.
Would you have been able to make the choice to leave Christianity if you hadn't been a Christian to begin with? Is kind of what you're saying.
Well, it's worse than that.
So I want to come in here. Me, please, me.
Go ahead.
So I think the big mistake with determinism is they don't understand time. Because, of course, looking backwards, there's evidential steps that have got us to where we are today. But that doesn't mean that any of that has got any relevance whatsoever to what's going to happen tomorrow. It's because this is
effects wash out in the layers. Some effects wash out in the layers.
Because this stuff is factual, history is factual. It doesn't mean that the future is predetermined in a crystal ball.
No, but it's not.
We're on a moving conveyor belt.
Yes.
So I guess my question to Tercia would be, how far back does your determinism go? You went as far back as your parents. I have two questions, actually. And then after you're born, is it nature or nurture?
It goes back as far as, I don't know, ad infinitum. I don't know if you've read.
It's turtles all the way down, it sounds like.
It's turtles all the way down. Well, just by the way, I'm quite a big fan of Robert Sapolsky. It's my dream to have him on our show, but John won't because John's scared of him because his arguments are. You said so, John.
That sounds like a challenge.
Yeah, well, I haven't even tried to get him yet. I might be able to because I've had similar people. Anyway, we'll look forward to that. I do admire his lecture skills. He's frighteningly convincing in his arguments. That doesn't mean they're right. Doesn't mean they're right. It just means he's good at it.
I have one other thing I do want to bring up. If there's time, I kind of want to throw out there. It was from one of my addendums.
Yeah.
Because I asked ChatGPT and it also couldn't give me an answer. So.
Right.
Do you know how?
What was, John? Are we live? Are we recording? Because
we're live. We're going.
I don't see the time. What's the time?
We got 8 minutes.
Yep. 53, 38, 30, 40. Come on.
Okay. Yep. Normally it's on the left, in the top left of my screen, but I don't see it tonight. Sorry, I think I lost connection there with you guys, so I'm
sorry.
Yeah.
You know how Christopher Hitchens has his name me one moral action that can be performed by a believer that could not be done by a non-believer. Right? So I've got something, I got my kind of like phrase, my challenge question, right? You ready? Show me something in the real universe that is truly opposite.
Opposite to what?
Itself. Or anything that's opposite. So maybe show me anything in the real universe that is true, pure opposites.
I don't understand what that means.
Well,
I'm sorry.
in the polar sense, in the up or down, left or right, plus or negative, right? Something is the opposite of the other. I have this theory, it's probably not mine, it's probably been done before, but I have this idea that in the real universe, that doesn't, absolutes don't exist. 0 and 1 don't really exist in the universe. They only exist as concepts because they're absolutes. And I asked ChatGPT, and it came up with the first thing I thought of, which was antiparticles. But that's not true. The reason is because they're not really opposite. They're not really like opposite of each other on an individual level. It's like any matter particle can annihilate with any antimatter particle, right? Any of them.
But they are opposite in specific terms as well. The electron, the positron.
Again, these are constructs that we create.
And if you want to go there, they're not particles either. They are waves. Right. So we're
and the other answer I usually get is a battery, like it has positive and negative, but that's not.
We're already in a mess there.
So yeah. Can I relevant to free will?
It's kind of, because when I talk about the idea that the answer to free will is none, as an absolute, we don't have absolutes in our universe.
Well, we don't have nothing. That's true, but
I mean, I'm perfectly comfortable with that we don't have absolutes.
Okay.
I don't have any problem accepting that. Before my connection broke off, I asked you whether you were familiar with the work of Robert Sapolsky.
I had never heard of him. No.
Okay.
So I'm probably going to dig into this topic a little more. And I do want to answer your question about. You said where does one person's free will start and another person's free will end? Right.
That was one of the questions I wrote.
He's just in front of the nose. Yes.
It's called personal space.
Yes. No, it doesn't. It doesn't work like that. You see, but I have a problem now. I have to show the audience and I have to show you guys. I have a massive problem now because look at this. Take a look at that.
That cat is using its free will to sit on your notes.
Exactly. I mean, speaking of indeterminacy.
Yeah. Can I? We've got a couple of minutes left. Can I just show you a very quick little clip? I think this is relevant. Take a look at this.
So I'm a theoretical physicist, but not a particle physicist. I'm what's called a condensed matter physicist. So whereas particle physics studies fundamental particles, again, we can think of that as things that can exist by themselves. In condensed matter physics, we also study particle-like things, but they're not fundamental. They're emergent properties of complex systems. Okay? So I have an example of this to try and explain it. So if we take the theory of light and we write it as a quantum theory, then the quantum description of light has it described in terms of particles that we call photons. Some of you may have heard of these. And photons are fundamental particles. They can certainly shoot off through space by themselves, as you can tell because you can see the sun. Now, if we write down the theory of sound, we can actually write a quantum theory of sound as well. And when we write the quantum theory of sound, we describe it in terms of particles which are called phonons rather than photons. Now, phonons can't be fundamental because sound can't propagate through space. It can only go through a medium. But if you're existing in a medium, like right now when I'm talking to you with sound, or if we lived inside a crystal, remember a crystal is something which on the atomic scale has a regular periodic array of atoms, then sound can propagate through those crystals. And we can write that theory in terms of a quantum theory of the sound, and then it can have a particle description in terms of these phonons. But they can't be fundamental, and one way to look at what's going on is that it's really a vibration passing through the crystal, okay? But it emits this perfectly good description in terms of particles. So that's an example of something we might study in condensed matter physics. Now, you might think that these emergent particles are sort of less good than the fundamental ones. You're like, I only want to know about the fundamental ones. I'd make the following argument. I'm not a zealot over this stuff, but most, if not all of the things you've ever experienced are actually emergent phenomena. Right? You don't really experience fundamental particles. And a lot of emergent phenomena you think exist. So, I don't know, let's take this glass of water right here. This is an emergent phenomenon. There's no fundamental particle in the standard model, which is the glass of water particle. This emerges out of other fundamental particles, but we still think it's real. right? So the idea of these emergent properties or emergent particles is going to be that when we carry out experiments on materials, then we're going to have a better description in terms of what we're seeing in terms of the emergent properties rather than the fundamental ones in many cases. Okay.
So if even particles are emergent, at the different levels of scale of increasing sophistication and complexity, surely there's a possibility that free will is an emergent phenomenon.
I don't think it manifests itself in our real lives. And the reason I'll say that, and I want to get back to Robert Sapolsky and my comment about all turtles all the way down. So I'm still reading his book, his newest book, Determined. And he actually, in that book, talks about free will as it really is turtles all the way down. So when you ask me whether it was determined that I would eventually become convinced that the faith that I grew up in was wrong, I don't believe it anymore, I cannot say with any degree of certainty that I won't have the same change of mind 5 years down the line and maybe become an evangelical. I don't know, because there are things about me.
And that's exactly it. That's it. Nothing can be determined if you don't know. If nobody has a crystal ball.
Yes, but the fact that I can't determine what the future will be doesn't mean so I can neither predict nor determine what happens from this second onward, but I can look back and say what determined what has happened up to this point.
Sure, but that wasn't.
But except
that's not choosable. That's happened. You can't alter the past.
Well, technically you can, but right, you can't.
Exactly. The fact that you can't alter the past means that what I am now, what is what I'm doing right now, my behavior, my actions right now have been determined by a myriad of things that I have no control over. And that's my point about free will.
So you mean that even subconsciously, like you didn't have a choice, that your personal and environmental deterministic states around you collapse to a point that you would eventually deconvert. Is that what you're saying?
The connection broke off, and I want to say could you just repeat? I just want to be sure.
Look at the tenses being used here. You were saying these things have been determined. Yes, that's the past. The past is determined. It's unalterable. I know Jason will say that the maths can go negative as well.
Ignore the Feynman stuff. No, you can't change the past. Leave it at that.
Yeah,
go on.
But the fact
so choice does not exist historically. Choice is only from now onwards.
No, but it is not even, because every single thing, every single behavior that I enact from now, so I think it's a bit of a red herring to get bogged down into now, because like you say, it's a conveyor belt, but every single action is determined by the action and the 10 billion things that went before that led to that action. And as far as you mentioned, I just heard something, Jason, about my subconscious. I don't even want to say that. I think the word subconscious is a little bit. I think 5 years from now, people won't be using that term anymore, because our brains are so complex and our physiology is so complex that we have no idea what is influencing how we act and respond to a great extent.
You said influencing.
Exactly. I want to pick up on that too. Yes, there are lots of things that happened in the past that influence our choices going forward. It doesn't take the choice away. It just
does, because we only have a choice.
But it's not absolute. It doesn't completely take the choice away. It just limits it to maybe I can have a donut or maybe I can have a bagel.
Yes.
Well, when it comes down to it, when you drill down, it actually does take it away to such an extent that it is basically completely. And I'll tell you why I say this. And I want to move one step back to our there's even more things that affect us that we have. Number one, we are not aware of it. And number two, we have absolutely no control over it. And
yeah, we accept that there are things that we can't choose, definitely.
Right.
Okay, so the things I want to give two examples, and I hope so. The one is a very famous experiment. It's called the Hungry Judges experiment, and it was criticized when I think it was done in Israel for the first time. In his book, Think Fast, Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow, Nobel laureate. His name is Jewish.
Doesn't narrow it down much.
Thinking Fast, Thinking Slow. Just Google that. The author of that.
Okay.
Thinking Fast. Kahneman, Daniel Kahneman. He mentions it in his for the first time, and I listened to on the Talk Origins podcast with Robert Sapolsky and Lawrence Krauss. Lawrence interviewed Robert Sapolsky, and he unpacked this experiment a little bit. But it has been tasted, it has been redone. It is basically, it can't be assailed. So the main thing that determines whether a judge grants a parolee parole or not, if you've controlled for all the other variables and all the other factors that can influence a judge's decisions, if you've controlled for all of that, the only predictable variable that controls whether a judge gives a parolee parole or not is the time that has lapsed between his last since his last meal.
Right. I remember this. This is the after lunch theory. Yeah. I remember this.
And if you ask the judge, why did you give that one parole and that one not? They did exactly the same. They committed the same crime. He will have lengthy arguments to rationalize his answer. And that is what distinguishes us from other living animals. Well, as opposed to dead animals. That's a silly thing to say. From other animals.
Choice vanishes with death.
Well,
field collapses when you die, for sure. Yeah. Along with a bunch of other ones.
Well, I think even before we die, we have no free will whatsoever at all. And the reason I think it's important, and to me, that's why I am fascinated by this discussion, because I think if we can accept that we have no free will, none of us, nothing.
Oh, Jason.
Sorry.
Jason's just.
I went and
raptured. I've even raptured.
Please finish that thought.
Gravity has just determined that Jason hasn't got the free will to be on camera.
I'm sorry, Tricia. Please finish that thought. You were getting at something.
I was going to say the reason I think it's important is because in a world where we accept that we have less and less, and where we accept that we don't have free will, we will be inclined to create a more humane world. 500 years ago, and I'm standing on the shoulders of Robert Sapolsky here. One of the examples he uses is just 500 years ago, we believed that some people could influence the weather. We call them witches. In certain parts of the world, people still believe that. They believe that our free will extended so far that literally special people could influence the weather.
Right. They were wrong about how far it extended, but we were onto something, is my point.
Okay, but so in the past 500 years, we've come to see that we have only 2%. I think that the future will show that we have less than even that 2%.
Oh shoot.
He's gone again.
I'm sorry, gravity again.
Yeah. So on that note, since we've already overstayed our welcome by 10 minutes, I'm going to...
What? Have we really?
Yeah,
Yes,
I knew this would be highly dilated.
Yes, it's difficult to keep time on this one. So I'm just going to show
I
another very short.
see the time.
I'm just going to show another very short. I can't even speak now. Just going to show another very short video, which is one of a guest we had a little while ago, and I think Jason was also in the audience for that one. You'll remember this, Jason. Take a look at Emma on free will. The other question I wanted to throw at you, Emma, is: does free thought presuppose free will?
Oh gosh, that's a tricky question. Thank you, John. Gosh, that's going to keep me going. I suppose it must do, isn't it? I mean, it's impossible to think of the idea of thought being free, in a way that, because I suppose you could think freely without being able to act freely. And we've got Jason Hoblin there saying, "Oh, in Sam Harris territory, greatest amount of happiness for most amount of people." Well, yeah, because that's the utilitarian approach, which would then, you know, it has its own problems. But when we do that, you know, how are you going to measure happiness and all that sort of thing?
So that was Emma Park. She, at the time, she was the editor of the Freethinker.
I'm impressed you were able to pull that clip.
I have the power. It's in my free will.
Well, before John shuts me down, I just want to say I can really recommend the Talk Origins podcast where Lawrence Krauss interviews Robert Sapolsky.
Well, my next step would be, I'm sorry to interrupt, but my next step would be, now that I've kind of got a theory, you know, in place, would be to actually write a book about it. Do a bunch of research, actually watch read Sam Harris's book, and maybe Tercia, you can give me that person's name in the chat or in an email.
I will in fact get my details from John and pop me an email, and will. And I'd like to continue. My ideas might help you to formalize and reformulate and formulate your ideas, because this is a topic that I really find extremely valuable.
I'll put the link in the details underneath of the talk between Lawrence.
I think I really enjoyed this show because it kind of forced me to. I didn't have a choice. Right now, I have to put together. I have to put together a presentation on free will.
You made the choice. You invited yourself onto my show.
Did.
That was free will.
But it was only the influence of the end of your last show, right? See,
well, I accept that there's influence that exerts an effect on free will, but it doesn't negate.
Well, and according to my 3x3 truth table, there would have had to been something there for me to make a choice about, right? Like to go, do I want to do a show about free will or not? Or anyway,
then you make your choice. Yes.
The only thing I can say is that you know, is it Hitchens that said atheists just go one god further? So I just take that final step and I say we have no influence whatsoever at all.
Right, but if we're not alone in the universe and aliens are actually everywhere in a deep dark forest around us, right? And they've been here for a really long time.
Get off! Get away!
Hold on. Then they're like demigods, right? Then they are above us, and it wouldn't mean that it's a no either. It would just mean that we have less of a god. It's not that there are no gods.
Okay. On that note, we're all infected with aliens, but next week we have a guest called Yvonne, who has also got a presentation that she made to, I think, the northern atheists, one of our branches in the north of England, based around Manchester. So she's coming on next week, and she'll give us her presentation, and we'll have another nice chat. So
I hate to throw on another one before. I know we're trying to get out of here, but I do have I wish atheists would stop fumbling when the morality question comes up.
Yeah.
The answer is evolution.
Yeah.
Period. That is where our morality comes from. Biological and social evolution is the source of our morality.
Yep. And it's not peculiar.
I hear highly skilled atheists start using not ad hominem, but like scarecrow type of arguments where like, oh, well, the morality of the Bible. I'm like, that's not a reply. That's not how you respond.
And it's not peculiar to humans either. Animals have various sorts of morality too.
My dog head nods at me.
Yes. There you go. So thank you very much. You've been wonderful.
Thanks,
Say
John,
goodbye.
for having me on.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Why is it not playing?
And